Okay, good morning everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. My name is Chris Watkins. I'm the Head of Security here at Ultima. And today's topic is Checkpoint CPX 360, which took place in Vienna last week. This is just giving everyone some highlights of what we saw, Checkpoint sort of key messages and sort of takeaways from the conference. So in terms of the way the webinar's run, everyone's on mute, so we can't talk to each other. But please do feel free if there's any questions to ask via the chat window on the right-hand side of your system. We're happy to take questions as we go along. Also, just to point out up front that some of the information we're talking about here is in Checkpoint's roadmap and sort of betas and that kind of thing. So things do change, unfortunately. So some of the timeframes and exact features can change around, but obviously always check the latest thing as we go forward. So firstly, what is CPX 360? So this is Checkpoint's sort of partner and customer conference, sorry. They held 3 of them worldwide. The final one was the one in Vienna last week. So that one was the biggest one they've ever done. There was just over 4,500 people attend. And what they've now started to do is things like keynote streaming on YouTube. It's basically where they announce all of their major plans for this year and beyond. So this year's tagline, that was the kind of theme throughout all of their sort of messaging, was secure everything. And we kind of go into what that means and sort of how that maps out. So some of the key things and what sort of took place during the keynote speeches. So Checkpoint have had a concept for a few years now of sort of a generation of threats. So last year was generation 5, this year is generation 6. So they're saying that this is something that organizations need to be aware of. So previously, organizations may be stuck at sort of generation 3 or 4. They're not protecting themselves against the very latest threat vectors. So this year is another change to that. New different attack methods are taking place. So this year is about nano security, and we'll cover what nano security is in one of the upcoming slides. Cloud, as we'd expect, has become very much a focus of everything. So many organizations have moved from traditional on-prem infrastructure to the cloud. And this time is also a big focus now in automation and workload security. So it's previously an area that kind of has always taken place. Developers kind of did their own thing, but securing that has become more and more important. Agility is also a key thing. So IoT devices are a key example of that. Even in people's houses these days, I've got lots and lots of devices at home connected to my internet connection. Trying to manage, maintain, patch those kind of devices is tricky. If you're a large enterprise, you could have thousands of those devices. So making sure we secure those is key. And the way we do that's got to change. We can't do it in the traditional method of sort of pushing out a patch every time. One of the things they highlighted was the root cause of many of the sort of attacks that took place. So phishing attacks particularly were a key one to this. Where actually the root cause ended up being people's mobile devices. So a lot of companies have invested heavily in sort of desktop and laptop protection when they're in the office and even when they're at the office, but mobile seems to be a bit of a forgotten piece. More and more people are working on tablets or smartphones, and securing those is just as important as securing your corporate devices. So drilling into some of the things that were kind of mentioned, so R80.40, for those of you who keep an eye on the Checkpoint website, was actually announced a couple of days before the Vienna conference. So this is the latest release of their software. So obviously, quite a big release. They do this a couple of times a year. So this is essentially developing on what was in the previous R80.30 release and before, and bringing a mixture of new features, new functionality, and sort of returning some features that were there previously. So the first one like this is a good example. R77 had a feature that a lot of people knew and loved around revision control. That was taken away as part of the initial release of R80, so that's now come back. So big list of other things like smart console updates. So previously, Checkpoint would release a number of smart console upgrades throughout the specific versions. So in R80.30, there's a handful of different releases as bugs were fixed and things like that. That's now automated as part of the program itself. It kind of just self-updates, so that makes it a little bit easier. They've also sort of streamlined the way that management and gateway components are upgraded. So different modules can now be upgraded independently of the complete platform, just to try and make things a little bit easier. IoT support is one of the big new features of R80.40. We'll drill into that a little bit later, but this is the first release to give this functionality, and this is something that will develop as R80.50 and R81 and beyond to sort of take place. VPNs had quite a few changes take place. Some people have in the past been able to use machine-based certificates back in R77. Again, that was taken away as part of the initial release of R80. That's returned. That's something we're seeing a lot of our customers ask for. They want the ability to do certificate-based VPNs on their machines, so that's now supported. And from a site-to-site VPN perspective, there's a number of key changes around the way they're set up. So you can now do multiple VPN domains on a single gateway. This used to be something that was possible via modifying files at the CLI. This is now in the GUI, so it makes life a lot easier, a lot less configuration and chance of mistakes and that kind of thing. It's something we see a lot of support tickets around, is that exact topic. So that should make life a lot easier. They've also changed the way large-scale VPNs work. So previously you'd have to create an object for each individual device, import a certificate, that kind of thing. This has now been done in a slightly different manner, so you can do a sort of a quicker rollout of a lot of VPNs in one go. Some of the things they're also looking to bring forward is around VPN setup for public cloud, so AWS, Azure. So today there's some sort of best practice guides on how to do that, but there's going to be a sort of change to that. So it will literally be I want to create a VPN to Azure. The wizard will run through that for you and configure everything as needed as per Microsoft's requirements. We've also worked on policy time installs. This is something that anyone that's known Checkpoint for a long time has always been something that they're trying to drive to reduce. So we're now under a minute. One of the other big changes is we can now do concurrent policy installs. That's something that previously wasn't possible in any of the Checkpoint platforms. So two different admins. Obviously, one of the beauties of R80 is you can do simultaneous administrators logging on making changes. They can now simultaneously push policies. And the last one is around SSO inspection. That's been a big focus of this release. So there's a lot of improvements around the way it works in the background, improving performance and reliability, but also the policy is now integrated into the main smart console. It's something that previously had to be launched into a separate GUI. So that's, again, just trying to make life easier for people. So in terms of some of the other features and sort of releases that came forward, so Infinity Next, so anyone that's been at a Checkpoint conference last year or seen Checkpoint sort of messaging, Infinity is a kind of a name for multiple areas in Checkpoint. It's the name of their management platform, but also the name for their consolidated security architecture. So this is the idea of this is a model where you can take a platform from from one vendor with a number of different features. Infinity Next, they're very creative. Their marketing name there is the name for their new model for that. And the big difference really is that it's now delivering on additional areas that previously it couldn't do. So traditionally, Checkpoint are very strong in sort of network, endpoint, mobile, and cloud. They've now enhanced that to IoT and workload security too. And what's powering a lot of that is Nano Agents, which we kind of mentioned earlier on, and we'll drill into what that means shortly. The other big one is Maestro. So for those of you who don't know, Maestro is Checkpoint's data center feature to allow you to essentially increase your throughput dramatically through a number of Checkpoint devices acting sort of in a load balance set. So rather than having a single gateway that can do X number of gigabits, you can have multiple gateways that are load balanced across an orchestrator, and that orchestrator will basically balance those to ensure you get even more throughput with a number of different devices. So one of the things that Maestro is doing a little bit unusual in is run a separate code base from the rest of the Checkpoint platform. Today that still is the case, but they have announced that from R80.40, which is not too far away, that's going to be unified. So you'll have the same code base on a Maestro platform as you will on all your other systems. So that should make life a lot easier from a patching and sort of ongoing feature and release perspective. You can also now mix appliance models on a single orchestrator within different security groups. So that's something that previously you had to have exactly the same hardware. Just gives a lot more flexibility to people who kind of have different segments where you need a bit more grunt in one area and less power in another area. So you can now separate that out. And as part of this, there's also a new appliance range that's been launched, which we'll talk about shortly, which gives you even more throughput than what you could do before. So in terms of the hardware releases, so this is the new Checkpoint range of on-premise firewalls. So down the bottom in the sort of the grey area is the old models that have been up and used up until recently, and then the ones above are the new range that's come out. And you can basically see from the sort of the figures there's more performance at a similar price point is the gist of it. Anything from the 6,000 range and above is now Maestro supported. So that's definitely a key strategy for Checkpoint from a data center perspective. Our thoughts are maybe that we eventually it will go down the route where the traditional cluster Excel model of active-passive firewalls will almost disappear and Maestro will become the normal, but we'll have to wait and see if that actually happens. But yeah, these are the new range of firewalls just coming out. So if anyone's thinking about upgrade shortly, you're on very, very latest technology. These are the latest Intel CPUs, chipsets, that kind of thing. Things like redundant power supplies and sort of 40 gig, 100 gig modules are now available as part of this. Going into the slightly smaller end of appliances, so branch office or SMB. So again, being a big change with the release of some new hardware there. So the 1500 series has been announced as the replacement for the 1400 series. So these are the gateways you'd use at smaller offices for sort of branch users. These are considerably more powerful, and they kind of offer an all-in-one solution. So you can have Wi-Fi included, you can have VDSL, 4G, LTE, that kind of thing, and Wi-Fi 6 is also making its way to these devices. These are all running R80 embedded code, so they're on the latest code base, and these are quite cost-effective in comparison to some of the bigger boxes. They're designed for those smaller offices. They also announced the EA version of their rugged appliance. That's the picture to the right-hand side. It's a bit of a beast to look at, lots of aerials. So this is designed for customers who've got manufacturing areas or sort of areas where you need to have a bit more of a specific purpose for a gateway. So SCADA and IOT is kind of one example of those. These devices come again with Wi-Fi, VDSL, cellular connections with external aerials. There's even a GPS antenna on there, different power options. So they're kind of designed for much more purposes. So that'll be out soon. That's currently in EA. So the other thing is part of the sort of the push for the Infinity Next model. Checkpoint have also gone down the route, as many other companies are right now, as sort of a SaaS model. So the Infinity Portal is Checkpoint's SaaS platform that's available for customers to take advantage of all the Checkpoint's infrastructure in one central place. So this already exists today for a number of different areas, and this is on a big ramp up to expand into other areas Checkpoint previously didn't do. So a lot of these today are in the early availability, sort of Checkpoint's beta program, and then other than that are coming on the roadmap. So things like management as a service is one of the big changes. So up until very recently, if you had a Checkpoint infrastructure that you'd manage yourselves, you'd either have like a VM locally, you may put it into Azure, or have a physical piece of hardware. So Checkpoint are now offering that as a cloud-based SaaS platform. So you'll be able to log into a web GUI, deploy and manage all of your devices from that single place, but Checkpoint will take care of that. So they do patching, they keep the system up, backups, all that kind of things, all taken place by them. So this is in EA right now. We've tried it out. It works very well. So that's kind of the future. You'll be able to just buy a SaaS-based platform rather than having an on-premise device. Tying into that closely is things like log as a service. So you'll be able to have your logs pushed straight up to the cloud, and that could be, if combining that with management as a service, but also for people who've got an existing on-prem infrastructure they don't want to change, but logging is a challenge. Maybe it's growing too quickly, or you need to keep it for longer. Checkpoint can take care of those log platforms for you. So all of this is very much designed to be web-based. The Checkpoint GUI obviously is still part of what they're doing. They've done some clever things around some HTML5 code to make it possible to see that GUI through a web browser without having to have any plugins or anything like that. And they've also integrated mobile app management. So everyone wants to manage things by an app. So there's a Checkpoint dedicated app for managing your infrastructure via that platform. And this is where the future of everything else is going to sort of go into. So a lot of the other features we're talking about in this presentation are managed from this Infinity Portal. So the idea is you'll be able to log in once. That's a secure logon, things like Azure AD integration, two-factor, that kind of things, all capable through there. But you'll be able to see all of your different platforms from a single place. So this will only grow over time. So we spoke earlier briefly about Nano Agents. So this is one of the key sort of future strategies for Checkpoint. So in order to take advantage of a single architecture where everything's sort of delivered by a single platform, they need to have a method of protecting lots of different components. So in the past, Checkpoint's obviously been very strong in the firewall gateway side of things and things like cloud. This is only now expanding into other areas. So a Nano Agent is essentially a small piece of software. So think of it almost as a gateway in a software package. The idea of these is that they're very small and lightweight. They're literally 50 meg rather than a sort of a complete installation of a product being a lot bigger. And you can push this out to existing platforms, be it either a piece of software or a device. So this could be an IoT device or actually have embedded Checkpoint code running on it. It could also be things like an Nginx reverse proxy. So as part of that software package, you'll be able to inject a Checkpoint agent onto there. This is all going to be centrally managed from the Infinity Cloud services that we spoke about just now. As part of that platform, you're going to get full access to Checkpoint's sort of threat prevention, intelligence, and sort of control methodology from a central platform and push that out simultaneously to both your gateways, to these kind of devices, cloud, IoT, mobiles, the lot. So this is kind of their feature. So this was kind of initially teased about last year in their conference in 2019, and now it's kind of reality that it's starting to come to light. So the key part of that of what they're trying to do is looking at IoT, as we mentioned earlier. So the sort of screenshot to the bottom right shows the kind of information they can get from the Infinity platform when you're managing an IoT device. So the idea of the gateway is it's kind of acting as a discovery pane from the network. It goes out and says, right, we found an IP camera. We can work out what that camera device is, which manufacturer it is, work out which firmware it's running, and therefore they can then use their intelligence feeds to say, this is the kind of vulnerabilities that may exist on it, or problems or risks associated with this device, and therefore define a sort of policy and sort of governance platform for it. So again, Nano Agents are key to this because some of the devices would have a Nano Agent installed on them to protect them properly. Other ways can be done in terms of running it as a sort of as it passes through a gateway. Protections will sort of stop things from happening. So as part of the R80.40 rule base, this is how that would look. So it's very much sort of tag based. So you can say a camera is a category, and we can then protect it as needed. So next is SD-WAN. Apologies there, throat issues. So SD-WAN is an area that Checkpoint have chosen not to kind of create their own product. So a lot of the vendors in the marketplace of this area have gone down the route of creating their own platform. So some of the Checkpoint's competitors have definitely done that. What Checkpoint have decided to do is rather than sort of create a separate SD-WAN solution that's independent of a lot of the other leaders, they're just going to partner with them. So leading vendors such as Silverpeak, VMware, VeloCloud, Cisco Viptela, Aruba, Microsoft Citrix, all these guys have existing platforms. They, people like Silverpeak, that's all they do. So Checkpoint have gone down the route of saying we'll be able to integrate very tightly with those vendors. They did a demo of both Silverpeak and VMware VeloCloud, completely integrated into their existing management platform, show exactly how it can sort of complement what those guys are doing, but you'll be able to get your same level of checkpoint protection that you're used to on a sort of traditional firewall in that platform. So one of the areas they've also focused on particularly is Microsoft. So we've got a lot of customers here, very Microsoft focused. Azure is a big platform for a lot of them, us included. And they basically created a very tight integration between the Azure Firewall Manager with the Checkpoint platform, so you get the same NGTX level of protection you get with a normal gateway, but via an Azure platform. So you're not deploying a separate firewall or even a cloud instance of a firewall. This is all at API level using Checkpoint's SaaS platform. So kind of the vision they've got is eventually you'll be able to get to the point where for sort of modern offices that are opening up in the future, you might not want to deploy a dedicated Checkpoint physical gateway. You would be able to deploy a simple Cisco router, for example. That router would connect through to Checkpoint's cloud platform, which is Cloudguard Connect, and you'll be able to get the exact same level of protection that you've got on your existing on-prem infrastructure for that branch office very, very quickly and effectively with no other infrastructure required. So they're kind of the suggestion they've put there in terms of time range, 3 minutes to secure office. It's very quick to set up and it can be centrally managed too. So it's a single pane of glass from a sort of management and reporting perspective. Cloudguard Dome9. This is, for those of you who haven't seen, this is one of their sort of acquisitions they made just over a year ago. So Dome9 is giving you the ability to sort of look at compliance reporting and visibility across most of the cloud providers. So they're the sort of the big three. So that's kind of a product that's done very well for Checkpoint. We're seeing quite a big uptake in that from our customer base. They've enhanced that a bit further with there's a feature that was released last year called Logic. Initially only released for AWS, but is now sort of enhanced around Azure as well. So the concept of this is that it can take logs from these cloud providers and basically understand from within those logs what kind of threats are taking place. So the idea of those is that from that, once you've worked out if there is sort of an attack or something taking place from the logs, we can act upon those automatically with a remediation rule to sort of block that traffic taking place. The other feature they've kind of developed and enhanced over the last few months is CloudBots. So this is very much around automation and remediation. So it's an open source project, so it's all available at the URL we put there, and these slides will be shared after the event, so everyone's got them. But the idea of those is that you download the code for the CloudBot, and we can take automated actions based on something it finds. So if the Dome9 tool finds a piece of compliance that's outside of what you would like as your corporate policy, it can automatically be configured to sort of remediate that and fix that issue before it becomes anything of a problem. Outside of Cloudguard Dome9, the Vienna conference was a sort of an announcement for some other areas. So the sort of picture at the bottom there shows the 5 different areas that Checkpoint are focusing on from their cloud platforms. So Cloudguard IaaS is the traditional first area that Checkpoint were into, which is essentially running a Checkpoint gateway in Azure or AWS. Cloudguard Dome9 we just spoke about, and Logic is a component of Dome9. But they've also branched out into 2 other areas which are becoming more and more popular and requested. So first one is Cloudguard WAP, which essentially is a web application firewall. So obviously there's some of the Checkpoint's competition have such technology already. So we're trying to, they're essentially giving you the ability to do that same concept within different cloud platforms. Again, centrally managed from the same Infinity portal, centralized logging, that kind of thing. Which gives you things like bot mitigation and API security as well. So that's in beta today. So if anyone's got any interest in that, that's something that's available right now to trial, and that will be out this year. The other area is workload protection. So this is an acquisition that Checkpoint made late last year. So again, in sort of beta, it's obviously an existing product, but in beta in terms of its integration into the Infinity portal and sort of wider picture of Checkpoint, but that's there already. It can integrate things like Kubernetes and looking at code bases and that kind of thing, and then using Checkpoint's existing threat prevention policies and features. And then finally, looking at the sort of the more general roadmap. So if anyone's been to one of Checkpoint's conferences, Dorit Dor is their VP from R&D who does this. She presents about 180 slides in 30 minutes. She doesn't even breathe. So there's a huge amount of information that comes out of there in a very short space of time. So we try to just take out some of the key features from there. Obviously, a lot of the areas we've spoken about already is part of that roadmap. These are the kind of things that are coming for either sort of now or in the short term this year. So Sandblast is Checkpoint's endpoint protection suite. So some of these features are available right now. So Mac is an area of growth. We're seeing a lot more customers use Mac now, and obviously Checkpoint are seeing the same thing. So traditionally, the Checkpoint suite it was kind of functional on Mac, but in limited format. So that's now part of the general package. The forensics reports have now gone down to a MITRE ATT&CK level. So you'll be able to see via that matrix exactly what's happening. The agent footprint has been reduced considerably. It was up at sort of 600-700 meg. It's now less than 200 meg. And they've managed to get the components that whenever you do an upgrade, there's now no need for a reboot. And they also now have integrated management for Microsoft BitLocker. We're seeing a lot more people use that. It's sort of simple and effective, so you can now manage that through the existing Checkpoint platform. And they've also launched last year cloud management for endpoints, so you no longer need to have an existing device on-prem to manage your endpoint platform. It can now be all done from the cloud. There's also a big push and focus on DNS level security. So this is all roadmaps section. This one, nothing's out today. Most of it's in EA. They sort of show some demos of this. So DNS Guard is the first one. So this is a bit of a similar product to things like OpenDNS, if anyone's used that kind of product. So Checkpoint hosts the DNS platform. You reconfigure your environment to point at that, and it then provides a layer of security from a DNS perspective. So what they're doing for that is essentially using the existing knowledge they've got within their threat cloud to sort of look at known malicious domains, IP addresses, that kind of thing, and can block content based on that domain name being known to be malicious. And that kind of then feeds into, they put a big push on a SOC platform to sort of enable SOC analysts to get a lot more information. So as you just said, with Threat Cloud is Checkpoint's sort of centralized cloud platform for all of their intelligence and knowledge that feeds a lot of the information the gateways use. So previously it's something that nobody could gain access to other than Checkpoint. So that they're kind of launching a full SOC suite that enables us to get sort of a web-based access to that intelligence. And there's some sort of some components that make that up. So ThreatGuard is the first one. So it's essentially a tool that will look at you register all of your corporate domains. It will then look at those domains in things like the sort of whois records and new registrations and say, okay, this is somebody who's actually just registered a domain that's very similar to yours. They've substituted an I for a 1 or something, and it can alert you to that, so you can then try and take some action based on that taking place. And then Analyst Mind was one that they showed this is the sort of the power for the SOC analyst. So it's essentially a full reporting and investigation suite to say, based on something you found on a gateway or a user's machine or anything, what kind of information does Checkpoint know about it? So it shows you things like activity across their customers, when domains were registered, information around existing threats, the things that have been found on a website that could be malicious, that kind of thing. So it's a full investigation suite into exactly what's going on. So this is something that's building, so it's early days, what we saw, but very much is sort of in their future way of sort of enabling customers to do more from the information that Checkpoint have already got. So we mentioned log as a service earlier on in the Infinity Portal side of things. So that's a new sort of cloud-based model for that. From a Sandblast network perspective, so some of the things that are coming very soon, so this quarter, things like click-time email protection if you're using the Checkpoint technology for that across Cloudguard SaaS or your network devices. So this means that rather than sort of previously a URL is inspected at the point of it transiting through the gateway, this will now be inspected constantly when a user clicks on it. So it's no longer could have relied on a decision that could be 10 days old. It will be an instant decision based on what may have happened since that first mail came through. And then things like phishing and fraud protection is being enhanced considerably, particularly as part of Cloudguard SaaS. So that's one of the strongest features of that platform. In case anyone doesn't know, Cloudguard SaaS is Checkpoint's sort of solution for things like Office 365 and other SaaS platforms. So it integrates at an API level. From an Office 365 perspective, for example, as an email comes into Office 365, the Checkpoint API will take that email message, send it off to Checkpoint for analysis, and then it goes back into the Office 365, all completely transparently to a user with a decision to say this is malicious, this is phishing, that kind of thing, and it can block mail as part of that as needed. So it's quite neat tech. It's kind of where Checkpoint are doing something a little bit different to what Microsoft are doing. So we've seen a lot of people seeing some success in running that as an additional layer of protection. And then on that platform itself, some of the enhancements to that, things like geo-restrictions and DLP. So when Checkpoint first launched Cloudguard SaaS, it was very strong in threat prevention and sort of malware and malicious content, but DLP functionality was quite weak. So they've enhanced that a lot more to say you can now put rules in to restrict things like Office 365 email, OneDrive, SharePoint activity based on data loss. So that's now part of the product right now. And on the roadmap, we're going to do a bit more from a reporting perspective. Today, the reports are pretty good. It's very similar to what you see from Smart Event, if anyone's used those. We'll be able to customize those a lot more. Multi-tenant support is coming. So that could even be within a single company. If you've got different divisions or different subsidiaries, something like that, you could have one GUI that enables you access to all of those from a single place, and you'll be able to drill down into each of them. We've mentioned things like click time prevention, URL sandboxing, and the other big one is Microsoft Teams integration. So Checkpoint don't currently support Skype for Business. I think obviously Microsoft have made an announcement that Skype's being replaced by Teams, so they put their efforts into integrating with that platform. So essentially that's kind of our high-level overview of what we found last week. For anyone that's interested in R80.40, that's available for download now via the support site, so you just need to use your user center account to log into that. As I mentioned at the very beginning, on Checkmates, which is Checkpoint's community site for all of their content, all the stuff that was presented at CPX has been published on there. There's a long article of downloads of videos and YouTube streams and presentation content. So again, as long as you log into it, you'll be able to see that. It's secured, so you have to be a member before you can access that data, but that's the link to get that information. From an Ultima perspective, we're more than happy to come and have a chat to you about how any of these announcements and sort of changes may be useful for yourselves based on your exact infrastructure and how your organization works. So more than happy to do that. Just drop a note to your account manager and we'll happily have a chat. So with that, we'll give everyone a couple of minutes for questions, but otherwise give you some time back. Haven't taken the full hour, and thanks for joining.